Kuala Lumpur, March 8, 2014, 12:41 a.m. Malaysia Airlines flight MH370 is preparing for takeoff, with 227 passengers and 12 crew members on board. The flight is scheduled to arrive at the Beijing Capital International Airport at 6:30 a.m. local time. Little do the passengers know that they will never reach their destination. At 1:19 a.m., the final voice transmission from the cockpit of the plane is received by air traffic controllers. Roughly an hour after the plane missed its scheduled landing time in Beijing, Malaysia Airlines announced it was missing. The Boeing 777 jetliner silently disappeared. Did the plane fly off course? Or did something more terrible happen aboard? Why did the pilots never activate an SOS or send out a distress signal? This is the story of Malaysia Airlines Flight 370. On a serene and moonlit night on March 8, 2014, a Malaysia Airlines Boeing 777-200ER, identified as MH370, embarked on its journey from Kuala Lumpur to Beijing at 12:42 a.m. The first officer, 27-year-old Farik Hamid, was at the controls, undergoing a training flight under the guidance of Captain Zahari Ahmad Shah, a seasoned pilot, 53 years of age. Zahari, well respected and known by his first name, had a family, lived in a gated community, and had a notable passion for flight simulation. As the aircraft ascended to its cruising altitude of 35,000 feet, 10 Malaysian flight attendants tended to the needs of the 227 passengers, including 5 children. The majority of the passengers were Chinese, with others hailing from various countries. In the cockpit, Zahari managed the controls while Farik piloted the plane. Despite the norm being to report leaving an altitude, Zahari made a seemingly unnecessary report at 1:01 a.m. that the plane had leveled off at 35,000 feet. As the flight approached Vietnamese airspace at 1:08 a.m., Zahari once again reported the plane's level at 35,000 feet. However, 11 minutes later, as the aircraft approached a waypoint near Vietnam's airspace, the Kuala Lumpur Center controller instructed them to contact Ho Chi Minh at 120.9. Zahari acknowledged the instruction with a casual good night, but failed to read back the frequency. Sadly, this proved to be the last communication from MH370, as subsequent attempts to reach the pilots went unanswered. You see, there are 2 types of radar systems used in air traffic control. The primary radar sends out simple signals that bounce off objects, while the secondary radar relies on a special signal from each airplane, called a transponder signal. This transponder signal contains more information, like the plane's identity and altitude. As MH370 entered Vietnamese airspace, something strange happened. Just 5 seconds later, the symbol representing its transponder disappeared from the screens of Malaysian air traffic control. Then, 37 seconds after that, the entire airplane vanished from the secondary radar at 1:21 a.m., nearly 39 minutes after taking off. Was it a malfunction in the systems? The air traffic controller in Kuala Lumpur was busy with other things on his screen and didn't notice right away. When he finally did, he thought the plane was already being handled by Ho Chi Minh, somewhere beyond his reach. The Vietnamese controllers, on the other hand, saw MH370 enter their airspace and then suddenly disappear from their radar screens. There was a bit of confusion. They misunderstood an agreement that said Ho Chi Minh should immediately inform Kuala Lumpur if an airplane handed over to them was more than 5 minutes late checking in. Despite trying to contact MH370 repeatedly, they got no response. When they finally called Kuala Lumpur, 18 crucial minutes had passed since MH370 vanished from their radar screens. This then led to a series of incompetent decisions. Ideally, Kuala Lumpur's Aeronautical Rescue Coordination Center should have been notified within an hour of MH370's disappearance. But by 2:30 a.m., they still hadn't been informed. It took 4 more hours before an emergency response was initiated, starting at 6:32 a.m. At the time when it was supposed to land in Beijing, the airplane, Malaysia Airlines Flight MH370, became the center of a massive search effort. Initially, everyone focused their efforts on the South China Sea, between Malaysia and Vietnam. This search involved 34 ships and 28 aircraft from 7 different countries. However, MH370 could not be found there. In just a few days, records from primary radar, which were recovered from air traffic control computers, along with secret information from the Malaysian Air Force, started to unveil a surprising path. After disappearing from the secondary radar, MH370 took an unexpected turn to the southwest. It flew back across the Malay Peninsula, circled around the island of Penang, and then headed northwest through the Strait of Malacca and into the Andaman Sea. The airplane vanished from radar after more than an hour, challenging investigators and indicating that this wasn't a typical hijacking, accident, or pilot suicide scenario. The mystery of MH370 sparked intense investigation and fueled public speculation. Families across 4 continents were devastated by the loss. The idea that a highly advanced airplane, equipped with modern instruments and redundant communications, could simply vanish seemed unbelievable. Deleting an email permanently is hard, and deliberately trying to live off the grid is almost impossible in today's world. A Boeing 777 is designed to be electronically accessible at all times. Yet the airplane's disappearance gave rise to numerous theories, some sounding absurd. Yet the fact remains that in this day and age, commercial airplanes are not supposed to vanish without a trace. 10 years have passed, and the whereabouts of Malaysia Airlines flight MH370 remain unknown. Despite this, much has become clearer, shedding light on what occurred that fateful night. While the cockpit voice recorder and flight data recorder may never be found, the answers we seek are unlikely to come from these black boxes. Instead, they may come from Malaysia. On the evening when the airplane vanished, a middle-aged American named Blaine Gibson was in his late mother's house in Carmel, California. He was sorting through her affairs as he prepared to sell the property when he heard the news about MH370 on CNN. Blaine Gibson, a lawyer by training, had lived in Seattle for more than 35 years, but spent little time there. His father, a World War I veteran and former Chief Justice of California, passed away years ago, while his mother was a Stanford Law School graduate and an environmentalist. Growing up as an only child, Gibson's mother fueled his passion for international travel. At the age of 7, he set a life goal to visit every country in the world at least once. Despite the challenging definitions of visit and country, he stuck to his mission, foregoing a traditional career and living on a modest inheritance. Along the way, he explored famous mysteries such as the end of the Mayan civilization, the Tunguska meteor explosion, and the location of the Ark of the Covenant. Wearing a fedora like Indiana Jones, Gibson identified himself as an adventurer, explorer, and truth seeker. When he heard about MH370's disappearance, he was naturally inclined to pay close attention, setting the stage for an unexpected journey into the heart of one of aviation's greatest mysteries. Despite initial denials and confusion from Malaysian officials and the Air Force, the truth about Malaysia Airlines flight MH370's peculiar flight path eventually came to light. It turned out that even after disappearing from secondary radar, MH370 continued to intermittently connect with geostationary Indian Ocean satellite operated by Inmarsat, a commercial vendor based in London. This connection persisted for 6 hours, debunking the idea of a sudden catastrophic event. During this time, the airplane was presumed to be cruising at high speed and high altitude. These satellite link-ups, known as handshakes, were brief electronic connections, mere whispers of communication, as the usual system contents, like passenger entertainment and cockpit texts, have been either isolated or turned off. In total, there were 7 link-ups, 2 initiated by the airplane and 5 by the Inmarsat ground station. 2 unanswered satellite phone calls also contributed additional data. Most of these connections had associated values that Inmarsat had recently started logging. The primary value, known as the burst timing offset or the distance value, measured the transmission time to and from the airplane. It indicated the plane's distance from the satellite, forming a circular set of possible locations. Due to MH370's range limits, these circles could be narrowed down to arcs. The 7th and last arc, crucial for determining the airplane's final location, stretched from Central Asia in the north to the vicinity of Antarctica in the south. MH370 crossed this arc at 8:19 a.m., Kuala Lumpur time. Calculations suggested that if the plane turned north, its endpoint would be in Kazakhstan, while a southward turn would lead to the southern Indian Ocean. Technical analysis strongly suggests that the airplane made a turn southward. We get this information from Inmarsat's second recorded value, known as the Doppler value. This value includes a measure of radio frequency Doppler shifts, crucial for understanding high-speed movement in relation to satellite position during flight. Doppler shifts need to be predicted and adjusted for by airplane systems for satellite communications to work correctly. However, due to imperfections in satellites, technicians at Inmarsat in London detected a significant distortion in the Doppler data at 2:40 a.m., indicating a turn to the south just north and west of Sumatra, the northernmost island of Indonesia. For about 6 hours after this turn, the Doppler data showed a steep descent, up to 5 times faster than a normal descent rate. Within a minute or two of crossing the 7th arc, the airplane plunged into the ocean, possibly breaking into pieces before impact. The electronic evidence suggested that this was not a controlled water landing. The plane likely fractured instantly. However, the exact location and reason for the impact remained unknown, with no physical evidence confirming the satellite interpretations. The Wall Street Journal revealed the satellite transmissions less than a week after the disappearance, indicating the airplane likely had stayed in the air for hours after losing contact. Eventually, Malaysian officials confirmed this account, but their handling of the investigation raised concerns. Withheld information led to misplaced sea searches in the South China Sea, finding no debris. If the Malaysians had been truthful from the start, debris might have been found, aiding in locating the airplane and recovering the black boxes. The search transitioned from surface waters to the ocean depths, where it continues to this day. Blaine Gibson, initially observing from a distance, sold his mother's house and moved to northern Laos. Joining a Facebook group dedicated to MH370, he found speculation mixed with useful insights about the possible fate of the airplane and where its main wreckage might be located. Even though the Malaysians were officially leading the investigation, they didn't have the tools or expertise for a deep-sea search and recovery effort. As responsible global citizens, the Australians stepped in to take charge. The areas of the Indian Ocean suggested by satellite data were so deep and unexplored that the first challenge was mapping the undersea terrain enough for side-scanning sonar vehicles to navigate safely beneath the surface. The ocean floor was full of ridges in a darkness where light had never reached. Was finding this even going to be possible? Blaine Gibson started to consider the possibility that despite the extensive underwater searches, airplane debris might wash up on a beach someday. While visiting friends in the Cambodian coast, he asked if they had found anything. They hadn't. Although it was unlikely for debris to drift from the southern Indian Ocean to Cambodia, Gibson wanted to keep an open mind until the wreckage was found, confirming the southern Indian Ocean as the airplane's resting place. In March 2015, a one-year commemoration of MH370's disappearance took place in Kuala Lumpur, organized by the passengers' families. Gibson, uninvited and largely unknown, decided to attend. Despite having no knowledge, his presence raised some eyebrows. The event, held at a shopping mall's outdoor space, aimed to collectively grieve and maintain pressure on the Malaysian government for explanations. Many attendees, particularly from China, gathered to listen to speakers, with a large poster displaying the silhouette of a Boeing 777 and words like where, who, why, when, whom, how, and others related to the plane's disappearance. Grace Supathirai Nathan, a young Malaysian woman whose mother was on the flight, emerged as one notable representative of the families. She wore a t-shirt with a graphic of MH370 and the words, "Search on." Inspired by this event, Gibson wanted to contribute by focusing on a perceived gap, the lack of coastal searches for floating debris. He decided to become MH370's private beachcomber, a role that the official investigators might have dismissed. While they were committed to the underwater search, Gibson believed that on beaches miles apart, he might find pieces of the airplane. The Indian Ocean hugs coastlines that spans tens of thousands of miles, depending on how many islands you count. Blaine Gibson, when he began searching for debris, didn't have a plan in mind. He went to Myanmar first, intending to visit and asked locals where flotsam usually washed ashore. They directed him to various beaches, and a fisherman took him there by boat. Although he found some debris, nothing seemed to come from an airplane. He advised the locals to stay vigilant, left his contact details, and moved on. Similar searches in the Maldives and the islands of Rodriguez and Mauritius yielded no relevant debris. However, on July 29, 2015, a municipal beach cleanup crew on Reunion Island discovered a torn piece of airfoil about 6 feet long. This piece turned out to be a flaperon from MH370. This find provided the necessary physical evidence to support electronic speculations, confirming that the flight had violently ended in the Indian Ocean, although the exact location was still unknown. The families had to face the harsh reality that their loved ones were gone. For Grace Nathan, whose mother was on the flight, this was devastating. She struggled to function for weeks after the flaperon was found. Gibson flew to Reunion, met with the foreman Johnny Baig, and explored the discovery site. Gibson then flew to Australia, where he consulted oceanographers Charitha Patariachi and David Griffin about the most likely locations for floating debris. They suggested the northeast coast of Madagascar, and to a lesser extent, the coast of Mozambique. Opting for Mozambique, Gibson arrived in Villaculos in February 2016. Guided by local fishermen, he explored a sandbank called Paluma, finding mostly plastic junk. However, a triangular scrap about 2 feet across caught his attention. Although his mind initially doubted it came from a large airplane, his heart urged him to consider the possibility. Back on the boat, 2 dolphins appeared, guiding them off the sandbank. Gibson's mother's spirit animal. Convinced, Gibson believed the scrap was from the plane. This horizontal stabilizer panel was later determined to likely be from MH370. Gibson continued his search in Madagascar, discovering numerous pieces on the northeastern shores. Paying locals for MH370 debris became known, and some pieces were still being investigated. Of the identified pieces, about a third were discovered by Gibson. However, concerns arose about the debris pattern possibly being skewed toward Madagascar, leading to the Gibson effect. In 10 years, no one has traced the debris back to a specific point in the southern Indian Ocean. Gibson remains hopeful of finding new debris that may explain the disappearance, even though current knowledge largely rules out certain possibilities. His discoveries confirmed the accuracy of signal analysis. The airplane flew for 6 hours until a sudden end, shattering upon impact. In January 2018, the U.S. marine robotics company Ocean Infinity took on the task of searching for the missing MH370 plane under a no-find, no-fee agreement with Malaysia. They focused their efforts on an area north of the previous search zone identified by a debris drift study. Unfortunately, this search, conducted in the challenging expanse of the Indian Ocean, faced obstacles like bad weather and average depths of around 4 kilometers or 2.5 miles. Despite these efforts, the search concluded a few months later without success. Locating planes lost in the deep sea is inherently difficult, and the extensive search failed to yield any clues. The vastness of the Indian Ocean, being the world's 3rd largest, adds complexity to the search efforts. Throughout the past 50 years, several planes have disappeared, making it a rare but challenging occurrence to locate them. The Malaysian government has maintained its stance, expressing willingness to resume the search only if credible new evidence emerges. Currently, there's consideration of a proposal from Ocean Infinity for a renewed search using advanced technology, though it remains unclear if the company possesses new evidence regarding the plane's location. Families affected by the disappearance continue their unwavering pursuit of answers, emphasizing the need to resolve the mystery, not just for personal closure, but also to prevent future disasters. The MH370 incident has also contributed to advancements in aviation safety. Starting in 2025, the International Civil Aviation Organization will mandate that new jets carry a device capable of broadcasting their position every minute during distress, aiding authorities in locating the plane in case of a disaster. However, this rule applies exclusively to new aircraft and not to the thousands of older planes still in service. Where MH370 went still endures as a mystery. Will we ever find out what happened on that fateful day in 2014? It seems unlikely, but with an improvement in technology, perhaps we can still cling on for closure.